What happens when a US senator challenges one of Washington's biggest poverty numbers? And the cabinet secretary responsible admits he didn't know how it was calculated. Senator John Kennedy just confronted Howard Lutnick over $1.4 trillion in government assistance, claiming the official poverty rate ignores major benefits. But does that expose a broken system or oversimplify a much bigger economic debate? Watch closely, because this hearing gets tense fast.
The Census Bureau is under your jurisdiction, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And the Census Bureau is in charge of defining what it means to be poor or in poverty in America. Is that correct?
I think it does economic analysis for America.
But it also defines poverty level, does it not?
I don't know if it's the defining
well, you need
Bureau.
to look, because it does.
Okay.
If you know, this isn't a quiz, if you know, what's the percentage of Americans who live at or below the poverty level?
I don't know the percentage.
Okay. It's around 11%. It's been constant. Now, when the Census Bureau defines poverty, they do it by income. You're aware of that. When the Census Bureau defines poverty using income, they only count income that the individual earns or cash income that the individual gets from the federal government. Is that correct?
Well, it includes all sources of their income. I mean, that is the purpose.
Yeah, their income and cash income from the federal government. Is that correct?
Oh, meaning does it include income that they receive from the federal government?
Yeah, cash.
I think so.
Yeah. So if a person makes $11,000 a year, that's considered toward poverty level. But if the person gets a cash payment, let's say in the form of SSI or TANF, that counts too. Is that right?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Are you aware that your agency doesn't count non-cash payments from the federal government defining poverty?
I am not.
Are you aware that your agency doesn't count refundable earned income tax credits, or food stamps, or housing subsidies, or utility bill subsidies, or Medicaid, or free school meals? They don't count that. They call it a non-cash payment, and it doesn't count. You aware of that?
It sounds to me that you and I are going to spend some time together and we're going to change it. But I did not know that, and it sounds like something that we should add.
And the purpose of my questioning is not to punish people who need help. The American people are the most generous people in the world. That's why we spend $1.4 trillion a year helping people that other countries would allow to die in a ditch. But your Census Bureau says it's 11% who live at or below the poverty level. That's a lie. It's 1%. If you count as any person with a brain above a single-cell organism would, cash and non-cash payments, they're above the poverty level. And we ought to be honest with the American people and thank them for getting the poverty level down to 1% instead of giving them a curb stomping and calling them selfish. Let me give you a real life example here. Let's suppose you've got a mom and two kids. According to your Census Bureau, the poverty level for her is $27,000. She makes $11,000 a year, let's say. So she's below the poverty level. But she also qualifies for $3,400 in refundable tax credits based on her $11,000 salary, $9,200 in food stamps, that's for her and her two children, $9,500 in housing subsidies, $900 in utility bill subsidies, $16,000 in Medicaid, $3,100 a year in free school free school lunches and $6,600 a year in TANF. That's $64,100 a year, tax-free. Is she living in poverty?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, but your Census Bureau counts her as being poor. I'm not saying take away her benefits. I'm saying give the American people a little credit. And I really think you need to change the definition to a definition that looks like somebody designed the damn thing on purpose. Final question, I'm going to hurry, Mr. Chairman. Why don't you just use satellite internet service? Why don't you just use Global Star or Starlink? You said the cost is $4,000 per person in Louisiana. For $600, you can buy a Starlink terminal. Why don't you just do that and do it across America and save a bunch of money?
The states were responsible for determining the best outcome, and sometimes fiber in a dense location can be economically better. Sometimes satellite does not work best on geography.
It can't be cheaper. That's impossible. Can't be cheaper.
Math is, each of the states did their best. We worked it out with them, and we moved on.
I just don't understand. You can buy, I'm not saying do Musk. There are others that just throw it out for bid. But $600 for a terminal versus $4,000 for fiber optic. This is taxpayer money. I'm done. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman. I should have known it's you, Shelley. You're much nicer than Jerry. He would have cut me off.
Yeah, Senator Shaheen.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. In your opening statement, you said the states chose to do it, meaning the BEAD program, the best way for their states. In 2023, NTIA allocated $196.5 million in BEAD funding to the state of New Hampshire based on a 5-year plan that were approved and submitted in 2024. And the state planned to develop broadband infrastructure by prioritizing fiber optic cables and hybrid fiber coaxial technologies. And I appreciate Senator Kennedy's question about satellite transmission, because in some places it does make sense, and as you pointed that out in your opening statement. But the reality is there are a lot of places where it doesn't make sense, because in states like New Hampshire, satellites are unreliable in severe weather. They have a shorter lifespan, and they require more maintenance than fiber optic cables. So as you pointed out also, in a lot of places, it's actually better long-term to use those fiber optic cables. And one of the reasons that New Hampshire submitted a new plan was because on June 6th, your office said they had to come up with a low-cost, technology-neutral approach that's required by the new guidelines. But that approach was not what the state had determined was the best way to connect. And now we see that SpaceX in June 2026, who was in negotiations with New Hampshire, has sent a letter to states with a set of demands that would ensure Starlink receives federal grant money even when residents don't purchase Starlink broadband service. The demands would also guarantee that SpaceX gets paid even if it doesn't reserve large portions of Starlink network capacity for homes in the areas that are supposed to receive BEAD-funded internet service. So my question, Mr. Secretary, is, given that and given concerns that we're seeing in the state of New Hampshire, are states going to be able to renegotiate with ISPs on the requirements of the program if they're dealing with a company like SpaceX that is not agreeing to what has been determined to be the requirements of their grants?
Thank you. New Hampshire, we agreed with New Hampshire in November of 2025. So they were one of the first and one of the fastest to go for the new guidelines, and they did an excellent job. 67% is fiber, because they determined that was the best outcome. 21.5% was satellite, and then, the fixed wireless was about 11%. So they used a technology-neutral approach. They saved a lot of money, and they've done your broadband office did a great job. So I just
there's no doubt about that, but the percentages are not totally accurate, because in a state like New Hampshire, where we have a lot of small communities and rural populations, the percentages don't accurately reflect the households we need to reach if we're going to ensure 100% access to broadband service. And that's the issue that I'm raising with you, because right now we have a plan that has been revised, and as you point out, it has been approved. But the reality is over 1,000 households or 1,000 locations, it's about 1,106, I think, depend on accurate, adequate connections to Starlink. And right now, we're engaged in a debate over whether Starlink is actually going to provide that service that we're trying to contract for. So what I want to know is, if we have an ISP that is not willing to abide by the terms of the agreement, can states go out and get a new ISP that's actually going to provide by the terms of the agreement?
It is my understanding that SpaceX, as you correctly say, sent you a rider to modify the terms.
They sent a number of states.
And they sent a number of states. That rider is outside of our guidelines, is outside the statute, and it is rejected by us. There will be no rider. And if SpaceX does not want to live without the rider, then you will definitely go find an alternative means of execution so you can deliver broadband to each and every one of the people in your state as you are entitled to and as we will deliver. So we are on the same side.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What you just watched raises some serious questions, not only about how Washington defines poverty, but also about how government officials measure success, spend taxpayer money, and explain major federal policies to the American public. Senator John Kennedy came into this hearing with a very specific argument. He believes the official poverty rate does not tell the full story because it excludes the value of many government benefits received by low-income families. According to the exchange, the traditional Census Bureau poverty measure focuses primarily on cash income. It does not directly count several non-cash benefits, including food assistance, housing subsidies, Medicaid, utility support, and free school meals. Kennedy's central point was that ignoring those benefits can make a household appear much poorer on paper than it may be after government assistance is included. That is not a minor technical disagreement. The poverty rate influences political speeches, federal spending decisions, news coverage, academic research, and the way Americans judge the condition of the economy. When politicians say that roughly 1 in 10 Americans lives in poverty, most people assume that number reflects the complete financial situation of those households. Kennedy is arguing that it does not. His most dramatic moment came when he presented the example of a mother with 2 children earning $11,000 a year. Based on her earned income alone, she would fall below the poverty threshold. Kennedy then added the estimated value of refundable tax credits, food benefits, housing assistance, utility subsidies, Medicaid, school lunches, and cash support. He said the total value could reach more than $64,000 a year. Then he asked the obvious question, is that family truly living in poverty? It is a powerful question because it challenges the way Americans normally hear poverty discussed. If a household receives tens of thousands of dollars in public support, should the government continue to describe that household using only its cash earnings? Kennedy believes the answer is no. He argues that taxpayers deserve recognition for the assistance they provide, and that the country should not continue using a measurement that makes those efforts appear ineffective. However, this is also where the debate becomes more complicated. Adding the estimated value of every benefit together does not automatically mean a family has the equivalent of $64,000 in spendable income. Medicaid coverage, for example, may be extremely valuable, especially during a medical emergency, but it cannot be used to buy groceries, repair a vehicle, pay a phone bill, or cover an unexpected rent increase. A housing subsidy may lower monthly costs, but it cannot usually be converted into cash. Free school meals help a family's budget, but they do not give parents unrestricted money to spend elsewhere. There is also the issue of whether every hypothetical household actually receives every benefit Kennedy listed at the maximum available level. Eligibility rules differ. Benefits vary by state, family size, income, housing situation, and program participation. Some people qualify for assistance but never receive it. Others face waiting lists, administrative delays, limited availability, or complicated application requirements. So Kennedy may be identifying a genuine weakness in the traditional poverty measure, but his claim that the real poverty rate is closer to 1% needs much more supporting evidence. The hearing itself did not establish that number as a confirmed fact. It was presented as Kennedy's conclusion based on a broader way of counting government assistance. That distinction matters. There is a difference between saying the official poverty rate is incomplete and saying poverty has nearly disappeared. The first argument is widely understandable. The second is far more difficult to prove. The Census Bureau already uses more than one method to examine economic hardship. A more complete analysis can include taxes, tax credits, government benefits, medical expenses, housing costs, and geographic differences. That kind of measurement may provide a more realistic picture than the traditional poverty rate alone. But even a broader calculation cannot fully measure insecurity, debt, unstable employment, disability, transportation costs, or the risk that one emergency could push a family into crisis. Another striking part of the clip was Secretary Howard Lutnick's response. Lutnick openly admitted that he was not familiar with several details of how the poverty measure handles non-cash assistance. On one hand, viewers may appreciate that he did not pretend to know something he did not know. Cabinet officials often give vague or carefully rehearsed answers when they are unsure. Lutnick's response was more direct. But on the other hand, the Census Bureau falls under the Commerce Department. When a senator challenges the accuracy of one of the most important economic statistics produced by the federal government, people expect the secretary overseeing that department to understand the basic methodology. That created an uncomfortable question. Was Lutnick simply caught off guard by a highly technical subject, or does his department need stronger oversight of the numbers it publishes? His promise to examine the issue sounded encouraging, but changing the official poverty measure would not be simple. Any major change could reshape decades of historical data. It could alter eligibility debates, budget discussions, and political arguments about inequality. It could also allow elected officials from either party to select whichever poverty statistic best supports their message. That is why the solution cannot be to replace one misleading headline with another. The public should be shown multiple measurements clearly. One figure can show cash income, another can show the effect of taxes and government benefits, another can examine actual expenses and regional living costs. Americans are capable of understanding that poverty is complicated, as long as the government explains the numbers honestly. The hearing then moved into a different policy battle: broadband spending. Kennedy questioned why the government would spend thousands of dollars per location on fiber infrastructure when satellite internet equipment may have a much lower upfront cost. His argument focused on taxpayer value. Why build an expensive physical network when a satellite terminal can potentially connect a remote household for a fraction of that initial price? At first, the comparison sounds devastating. A few $100s for satellite equipment versus several $1,000s for fiber installation appears to be an easy decision. But Senator Shaheen introduced the missing side of that comparison. The cheapest equipment is not always the cheapest long-term solution. Satellite internet may work well in isolated areas where fiber construction is extremely expensive. However, performance can depend on weather, available network capacity, terrain, maintenance, service terms, and the number of users sharing the system. Fiber is more expensive to install, but it can provide high capacity, consistent performance, and long-term reliability. In some communities, it may be the smarter investment even when the upfront cost is higher. This is the key policy question. Should the government choose the cheapest immediate option, or the option likely to deliver the strongest service over many years? The answer probably depends on the location. A technology-neutral approach can make sense when it allows states to choose fiber, satellite, fixed wireless, or another system based on local needs. But technology-neutral should not become a slogan used to force every community toward the lowest initial bid. Rural households deserve service that works, not simply service that looks affordable in a federal spreadsheet. Shaheen then raised concerns about reported conditions SpaceX wanted added to broadband agreements. Lutnick gave one of his clearest answers of the hearing. He said the proposed rider was outside federal guidelines and outside the statute. He stated that it had been rejected. He also said that if SpaceX refused to participate without those additional conditions, states could seek another provider. That answer matters, because federal broadband funding should not guarantee payments to a company without guaranteeing meaningful service to the public. The company involved should not be the main issue. Whether the provider is SpaceX, a local fiber company, a national telecommunications corporation, or a wireless operator, the rules should be the same. Public money must come with measurable obligations. Providers should have to meet coverage standards, performance requirements, contract terms, and deadlines. The broader theme connecting both parts of this hearing is accountability. In the poverty debate, the question is whether government statistics accurately reflect the effect of government spending. In the broadband debate, the question is whether government spending produces the service taxpayers were promised. In both cases, Washington relies on complicated formulas, technical definitions, and massive programs that ordinary citizens rarely have time to examine. That complexity can hide waste, but it can also encourage misleading political claims. A senator can make a number sound outrageous without explaining every limitation. An agency can defend an official statistic without admitting what it leaves out. A company can advertise a low-cost solution without discussing capacity or long-term reliability. That is why transparency is essential. Show the public how poverty is calculated. Show the value of benefits, but also explain which benefits cannot be used like cash. Show how many households actually receive the assistance being counted. Show the cost of broadband construction over 10 or 20 years, not just the price of the initial equipment. And show the exact requirements attached to federal contracts. Kennedy was right to demand a clearer explanation of the poverty rate. Shaheen was right to demand enforceable broadband commitments. Lutnick was right to reject contract conditions that he said fell outside the law and program guidelines. But none of those answers should end the debate. The real test comes next. Will the Commerce Department seriously review how poverty statistics are presented? Will it publish a clearer comparison between cash income and total government assistance? Will states receive enough flexibility to choose the best broadband technology for each community? And will companies be held accountable if they accept federal money but fail to deliver reliable service? Those are the questions viewers should continue watching. Because the most important moment in a congressional hearing is not always the dramatic accusation or the viral exchange. Sometimes it is the promise an official makes after the cameras move on. The public now has to see whether those promises produce real changes or simply become another forgotten moment in Washington. What do you think? Was this a genuine explanation, or are there still major questions that need answers? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe for more political updates and analysis.